Ladies and gentlemen, I want to speak to you today about something powerful. Something every strong, wise, and purpose-healed woman needs to understand. We live in a world where people are quick to judge, quick to speak, and slow to understand. But there is wisdom in keeping certain things close to your heart. Not out of fear, not out of shame, but out of discernment, strength, and peace. A woman who walks with purpose doesn't reveal everything. She doesn't expose her every move, her every thought, or her every struggle. She knows that silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And secrecy isn't dishonesty, it's strategy. There's some things a woman should always protect, no matter how close people are, no matter how loud the world gets. These are the things that shape her destiny. And if she guards them wisely, she will walk with confidence, clarity, and peace. Let me tell you something. When you don't reveal everything, you give God the room to finish what He started. You give yourself permission to grow in private, to heal in silence, and to rise without noise. Not everyone needs to know your next move. Not everyone is worthy of your deepest thoughts. And not everyone can handle the weight of your dream. So I encourage every woman listening today, be bold enough to shine, but wise enough to hide. Guard what's sacred, protect what's still forming, and know that sometimes the greatest strength is in what you choose not to share. Because a woman who hides well rises well. There is something incredibly powerful about a woman who knows where she's going, but doesn't feel the need to announce every step. In a world driven by constant updates, public declarations, and the need for validation, it takes confidence to remain quiet. It takes inner strength to work behind the scenes, to develop in silence, and to move in purpose without the applause. A woman who hides her next move isn't being strategic out of wisdom. Your next move is sacred. It's not just another decision. It's a piece of your future unfolding. And when you make the choice to guard it, you protect it from voices that don't understand, opinions that don't matter, and energy that doesn't support your journey. Not every idea needs to be met with agreement. Not every opportunity needs to be discussed before it is acted upon, and not every path needs to be validated before it's walked. Sometimes the most dangerous thing a woman can do is overexpose what's still in process. When you tell the wrong people your next move, you give them room to plant seeds of doubt in soil that was meant to grow faith. You allow fear to enter where clarity was trying to form. You risk someone else's insecurity clouding your confidence. That's why it's wise to move in silence until there's something solid enough to speak about. The early stages of a dream are fragile. The first steps toward a vision are delicate. And you don't need the world's permission to begin. You only need God's direction and your own obedience. When a woman chooses to hide her next move, it doesn't mean she lacks direction. It means she respects her destiny too much to put it on display for careless opinions. Some people don't really want to see you win. Others may love you, but they don't have the capacity to understand what God is doing in you. And some, even with good intentions, will speak fear into what you were called to do with faith. You must learn how to build privately. Grow roots before you stretch your branches. There is protection in silence. There is stability in moving with quiet confidence. You don't have to post about your progress to prove it's real. You don't have to speak about your goals to validate your purpose. The fruit of your labor will speak when the time is right. Every woman walking in purpose must understand that timing is just as important as action. A premature announcement can sabotage a perfectly timed plan. Just because you're excited doesn't mean it's time to share. There's a difference between momentum and readiness. Let God finish shaping what He started in you before you introduce it to the world. Let your plans mature. Let your confidence deepen. Let your skills develop. When it's ready, it will shine. And you won't have to force it. There's also freedom in not having to explain yourself. When people don't know your next move, they can't box you in. They can't place their limitations on your path. They can't interrupt what they can't predict. The more silent you are, the more control you maintain. The more you keep to yourself, the more space you give God to move without interference. You don't have to be mysterious to be wise, but you do have to be intentional. Not everything needs to be exposed. Not every step needs an audience. There will come a time when your next move becomes your now moment. When the thing you prayed for becomes public. When the doors that opened in private now stand wide in front of others. But until then, protect what you're building. Guard what God is growing in you. Stay focused, stay committed, stay quiet until it's time to speak. Because the woman who hides her next move isn't hiding out of fear. She's preparing in faith. She's not retreating. She's rising. And when she finally steps into the light, she won't have to explain where she's been. Her results will do all the talking. There is a certain kind of strength that doesn't show itself in loud voices or bold moves. It shows itself in quiet endurance. A woman who has walked through pain and learned how to carry it with grace doesn't need to broadcast her wounds. Her scars speak for her, but only to those who have the eyes to see. Not every person you meet is meant to know the journey that shaped you. Some things are too sacred to be explained. Some chapters are too personal to be read aloud. And some of your deepest pain is meant to stay between you, God, and healing. The truth is, not everyone has the capacity to handle your hurt. Pain, when shared in the wrong spaces, can be misunderstood, judged, or even used against you. That's why a wise woman learns how to protect the places where she bled. She doesn't deny what she's been through, but she refuses to let the world pick at wounds that are still closing. She knows that being vulnerable is not the same as being exposed. You can be authentic and private at the same time. You can be real about your story without giving people access to your sorrow. There is power in knowing that your past pain doesn't have to be public knowledge. It doesn't make you fake, it makes you discerning. The most broken parts of your story often carry the most value, and anything of value deserves protection. Some people ask about your pain not because they care, but because they're curious. Some want to analyze your struggle rather than help you heal from it. And others simply can't handle the weight of your truth. So you must learn to guard it, not out of pride, but out of wisdom. Healing is personal. It doesn't need a spotlight or a crowd. It requires time, reflection, and often privacy. When you share your pain too soon, you interrupt your own process. You open up too early and the raw places of your heart become vulnerable to careless handling. That's why a strong woman doesn't rush to tell everyone what broke her. She waits, she listens, she heals, and only when it becomes strength does she choose whether to speak about it, and even then, only to the right audience. There are people in this world who will define you by what hurt you. They will try to limit your future based on the wounds of your past. That's why silence can be a shield. It's not about pretending it didn't happen. It's about refusing to let it control the narrative. You don't owe anyone a detailed explanation of your suffering. You don't need to recount every painful memory to be seen. Your worth is not in your wounds. It's in your survival. When you hide your deepest pain, you're not burying it. You're respecting its impact. You're giving it the dignity it deserves. Because pain can be sacred. It can be the very place where your character was formed, where your faith was tested, and where your resilience was born. And sacred things aren't meant to be paraded. They're meant to be protected. You don't need to be a walking confession. You don't need to bleed in front of everyone just to prove that you're real. What makes you real is how you've risen from what tried to break you, even when no one else saw it. There's something beautiful about quiet healing. It's the kind that doesn't need applause. It's the kind that happens in prayer, in solitude, in reflection. It's the kind that God does in the hidden places of your heart, away from the noise, away from the pressure, away from the expectations of people who don't understand what you've had to carry. And when you heal privately, you become stronger publicly. Not because you've shared your pain, but because you've mastered it. So never feel guilty for keeping certain parts of your journey to yourself. Never let anyone pressure you into sharing what you're still processing. Your story is yours, your healing is yours, and your deepest pain deserves your protection. You don't have to be loud to be real. You don't have to be open to be whole. Sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is hide her pain. Not to deny it, but to honor it. Because when you've made peace with your past in private, you can walk into your future with power. And you won't need anyone to understand your silence, because your peace will speak louder than your pain ever could. Truth is one of the most intimate, transformative journeys a person can walk through. For a woman who is determined to rise above her past, elevate her mindset, and step into a greater version of herself, growth is not always visible. It's internal, personal, and deeply spiritual. There's something sacred about becoming, something powerful about evolving quietly, without needing to make announcements or seek validation. Wise woman knows that growth is not for show, it's for substance. There's a season in every woman's life where she begins to shift. Her thoughts become deeper, her habits become healthier, her circle becomes smaller, and her focus becomes sharper. She doesn't talk the same, react the same, or entertain what she once tolerated. But these changes don't always make noise. They don't come with grand gestures or social media updates. They often happen in silence, behind closed doors, in early mornings, through late night prayers, in honest conversations with herself, and in the still uncelebrated moments of discipline. You don't have to tell the world you're growing for it to be real. True growth doesn't need an audience. It happens when no one is clapping, when no one is watching, and when no one is even aware that something inside of you is shifting. It's a personal decision, a choice, to rise above old patterns, to break unhealthy cycles, and to become emotionally, mentally, and spiritually stronger. When you're growing, it may look like isolation, but really it's elevation. You're not being distant, you're becoming distinct. And people won't always understand that. There are moments when sharing your growth can actually invite unnecessary resistance. The more people know about your transformation, the more they may feel entitled to comment on it, question it, or compare it to their own expectations of you. That's why it's important to protect your process. When you're in the middle of becoming, you're still fragile, still forming, still building something new. And if you expose that too soon, you give people access to criticize what they don't understand and interrupt what they were never meant to influence. A woman in growth doesn't owe anyone explanations. She doesn't need to justify her boundaries, her silence, or her decision to no longer engage with certain people or habits. Sometimes the best thing you can do is say nothing and keep moving forward. Let your peace prove your progress. Let your consistency be your confirmation. Let your quiet strength speak louder than any post or conversation ever could. There's beauty in growing privately because it gives you room to fail safely, to learn freely, and to transform authentically. You don't have to pretend to have it all figured out. You don't have to share every revelation or every win. Some things are just for you and the God who is shaping you. There's nothing fake about being selective with your journey. In fact, it's a sign that you value it deeply. When you know how far you've come, how hard you've worked, and how much you've endured, you're not quick to put it on display. You hold it close. You honor it. Growth is not just about becoming better for the world. It's about becoming whole for yourself. It's learning how to let go of things that no longer serve you. It's developing emotional maturity, spiritual clarity, and mental resilience. It's learning how to respond rather than react. It's forgiving people who will never say sorry. It's learning how to love yourself without conditions and trust yourself without doubt. And none of that has to be shared to be significant. So if you're in a season of personal growth, don't feel pressured to explain it. Don't let anyone rush your process or shame your quietness. You're not distancing yourself. You're discovering yourself. You are not being prideful. You are being purposeful. Growth is not loud. It is subtle. It is deep. And it is personal. Keep becoming, keep rising, and keep protecting the woman you are shaping into. Because one day, when the time is right, your life will speak so loudly of your transformation that you won't have to say a word. People will see it, they'll feel it, and they'll know something powerful happened inside of you long before you ever made it public. There's something incredibly fragile and sacred about a dream when it's still in progress. It's that tender space between believing and becoming, between vision and reality. In this stage, a woman is carrying more than just an idea. She's carrying the weight of purpose, potential, and possibility. And that's why a woman who understands the value of her dream protects it fiercely while it's still forming. She doesn't need to declare it. She doesn't need to prove it. She simply needs to guard it, not because she's unsure, but because she knows that not everyone can handle what's still under construction. People often misjudge what they don't understand. When you share a dream that's still taking shape, you invite voices that haven't seen what you've seen. And when a dream is vulnerable, even the smallest seed of doubt can take root if it's planted in the wrong soil. The wrong voice at the wrong time can discourage what God is trying to grow in you. That's why the wisest thing a woman can do is hide her dream while it's maturing. A dream in progress isn't meant for public discussion. It's meant for private development. Just like a seed doesn't grow above the ground, your dream doesn't need to be exposed before it's time. There's beauty in waiting and nurturing and doing the work that no one sees. That quiet labor, the kind that happens when the world is sleeping and the distractions are silenced, is often the most fruitful work you will ever do. Because that's where character is built. That's where vision is clarified. That's where endurance is developed. When you tell people too soon, you risk letting their fears become your hesitation. You risk letting their limitations become your ceilings. Even those who love you may unintentionally talk you out of what you were called to step into. They may remind you of the odds, point out the obstacles, or question your timing. But a woman who's serious about her dream knows she doesn't need to convince anyone. She just needs to stay focused. The truth is, not everyone is ready to celebrate what you're building. Some won't support it simply because they can't see it. Others may feel threatened by your boldness, your clarity, your drive. And still others will try to copy it before you've even finished creating it. That's why silence is your shield. When your dream is protected, it's allowed to grow without contamination. You have the space to make mistakes, to change direction, to evolve the vision as it takes shape, without commentary or criticism. There's also peace in the privacy. When no one knows what you're building, you're free from pressure. You're not rushed by expectations or weighed down by opinions. You can work at your own pace, make decisions based on your inner guidance, and listen more closely to the still, quiet voice of purpose inside you. There's clarity that comes when you stop seeking approval and start seeking alignment. It's not about hiding forever. It's about knowing when to reveal. There will come a time when your dream will speak for itself, when the results will make the introduction, when your work will walk into rooms before you do. But until then, let your dream grow in the dark. Let it stretch. Let it take root. Let it develop a foundation so strong that when it finally shows up in the world, nothing can shake it. A woman who protects her dream is not being secretive. She's being selective. She understands that everything great is built in phases. You don't unveil the blueprint before the structure is ready. You don't hand out invitations while you're still laying the bricks. You don't speak about it until you're certain it's strong enough to withstand being seen. And when that time comes, you won't need to explain how it happened. The fruit of your patience, your silence, and your faith will be evident. So hold your dream close. Don't apologize for protecting what's precious. Don't second guess your silence. Some of the most powerful breakthroughs happen when no one's watching. Some of the greatest moments of creativity and inspiration come in solitude. And when the world finally sees what you've been building in the dark, they'll understand your silence wasn't a delay. It was preparation. You weren't being distant. You were being diligent. And now your dream speaks louder than words ever could. There is a quiet kind of power in a woman who knows her financial worth but doesn't feel the need to announce it. She could be building quietly, investing wisely, saving diligently, or even recovering from financial setbacks, and yet she carries herself with confidence and grace. That's because financial strength doesn't always look like what the world expects. It doesn't always drive the flashiest car or wear the most expensive brands. Sometimes it looks like peace. Sometimes it looks like discipline. Sometimes it looks like silence. A woman who chooses to keep her financial position to herself isn't hiding because she's ashamed. She's simply wise enough to know that money can attract attention that isn't always honest. The moment people think they understand what you have, they start drawing conclusions, forming expectations, and sometimes making assumptions. They'll try to measure your generosity, gauge your success, or even question your spending. But when you keep that part of your life to yourself, you take away the power of those assumptions. You don't owe anyone a financial report. You don't need to prove how much you have or how little you're managing. That part of your life is personal, and it's no one's business but yours and God's. Sometimes keeping your financial world private is the greatest form of protection. Not just protection from envy or manipulation, but protection from pressure. Because the moment people think you have something, they begin to place demands on it. They want help. They want access. They want explanations. And if you're not careful, you'll find yourself carrying the weight of people's needs simply because they believe you can. But when you protect that space and keep it sacred, you give yourself room to breathe, to plan, and to grow without interfering. A woman who is financially aware understands that her security comes not from showing off what she has, but from building a life that can sustain storms. Her peace isn't rooted in public praise or recognition. It's rooted in quiet wisdom. It's in the choices she makes when no one's watching. It's in the way she budgets, the way she prepares, the way she says no when needed, and the way she trusts the process. She may not talk about it. She's working. She's learning. She's making moves that don't need to be announced. There are also times when a woman is rebuilding. Maybe she's recovering from debt, from poor decisions, from life situations she didn't see coming. And in those moments, silence is not deception, it's strategy. It's not hiding, it's healing. Because the world can be harsh when you're in recovery. People are quick to judge what they don't understand. They mock your simplicity. They question your journey. They measure your worth by your wallet. But a woman of depth knows better. She doesn't tie her identity to her bank account, whether in abundance or lack. She walks with dignity because her value was never about numbers. It was about purpose. When you're quiet about your finances, you also protect your future. You avoid attracting the wrong people, those who are drawn to your resources rather than your soul. You keep opportunists at bay. You keep relationships genuine. And you learn who truly values you. Not for what you can give, but for who you are when there's nothing to offer but your presence. There's a level of maturity that comes with financial discretion. It says, I don't need to flaunt what I have to feel secure. I don't need validation to feel successful. It's understanding that stewardship is more powerful than status. It's the quiet confidence of knowing you're building something solid, even if no one else sees it yet. And when the time comes, the fruit will speak louder than the figures ever could. So whether you are thriving or surviving, building or rebuilding, saving or sowing, keep that space sacred. Let your financial journey be yours. Let your decisions be based on wisdom, not on appearances. Because in the end, it's not what people think you have that matters. It's what you actually hold in peace, in freedom, and in quiet strength. And that kind of wealth, the kind that doesn't need to be spoken, is the richest of all. There are moments in life when relationships, whether romantic, familial, or friendships, go through storms. Misunderstandings arise, expectations clash, communication breaks down, and sometimes hearts are left bruised in the process. But a woman of wisdom knows that not every disagreement, not every challenge, and not every broken place in a relationship is meant for public display. Some struggles are best carried in silence, worked through with discernment, and protected from the opinions of others who are never meant to be involved. In the heat of frustration or pain, it can feel tempting to talk, to vent, to post, to explain your side of the story. But once you open that door, it becomes difficult to close it. People form opinions based on one side, make assumptions from incomplete pictures, and often insert their own experiences into your situation. What starts as a moment of vulnerability can quickly turn into a mess of misunderstanding, gossip, and judgment. And suddenly what was once a private issue becomes public entertainment. A woman who chooses to keep her relationship struggles to herself isn't being fake. She's being intentional. She understands the value of peace, and she refuses to let temporary emotions lead to permanent damage. Because not everyone who listens has the wisdom to advise. Not everyone who comforts knows how to protect. Some simply want the story, not to help you, but to have something to talk about when you're not in the room. There's also strength in holding space for healing without spectators. When you take your problems to God, to trusted counsel, or even just to your own reflective moments, you give the relationship a chance to breathe. You allow the other person to grow without being painted as a villain in someone else's version of a story. You allow yourself to process what you're feeling without feeding it to an audience that may magnify it. You give space for restoration, or if needed, closure with dignity. Silence in relationship problems isn't about denial. It's about direction. It says, I'm choosing to respond, not react. It says, I value what we had or still have enough not to tear it down for the sake of sympathy or validation. It says, I am strong enough to carry this without turning it into a performance. There's a quiet maturity in knowing that some things, even painful ones, are better kept between the people involved. A woman of discernment knows that time reveals what emotion often clouds. Today's anger might soften with tomorrow's understanding. A harsh word now might have been said in pain, not malice. A mistake might be a lesson in disguise. But when you tell the world too soon, you lock yourself into a narrative you may later wish you'd never written. People remember what you said about someone in a moment of weakness, even when you've forgiven them. People hold on to the offense long after you've moved on. That's why it's often better to say nothing until clarity comes. There's also a form of self-protection in staying silent. When you choose not to expose your struggles, you maintain your dignity and your energy. You keep your heart from being picked apart by outsiders. You preserve your focus for what truly matters: healing, growth, and direction. Whether the relationship is mended or ends, you've kept your integrity intact. And that kind of emotional intelligence can't be taught. It's learned through experience. The relationships are never perfect. They require grace, patience, humility, and a willingness to grow. But even when they falter, a woman of character handles them with care. She doesn't use pain as a platform. She doesn't weaponize private moments for public sympathy. Instead, she learns, she reflects, and she rises. Not because it didn't hurt, but because she refused to let the hurt define her. So when the tension rises and the emotions run deep, pause, breathe, think. Everything doesn't need to be said. Everything doesn't need to be shared. Some things are sacred even when they're broken. And when you choose to keep your relationship issues out of the spotlight, you're not pretending everything is fine. You're honoring the process of finding out what's still worth fighting for. A woman who can hold her peace in the middle of personal conflict is a woman who cannot be easily shaken. Her silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Her restraint isn't fear, it's strength. And in that quiet, she gives herself the space to heal, to decide, and to ultimately protect her heart from noise that never deserved to be invited in. There's a distinct power in unpredictability. Not the chaotic kind, but the kind that comes from being so focused, so disciplined, and so intentional that no one ever truly knows what you're about to do next. A woman who learns to keep her next move to herself is not only preserving her peace, she's protecting her purpose. In a world obsessed with instant sharing and constant updates, she has chosen a different path, the path of discretion, strategy, and silence. When people don't know what you're planning, they can't interfere with it. They can't discourage you. They can't plant seeds of doubt or manipulate your direction. They can't compete with what they can't see, and they certainly can't sabotage what hasn't been spoken. This is why it's often in your best interest to move in silence, not because you're hiding, but because you're building. Not because you're unsure, but because you understand the value of timing, and you know that every move doesn't need a microphone. A woman who guards her next step is often misunderstood. People may assume she's doing nothing, when in reality she's doing everything, quietly, intentionally, and without needing approval. She's not absent, she's evolving. She's not stagnant, she's strategic. She's not cold, she's concentrated. And while others are busy talking about their goals, she's achieving hers, one step at a time, without the applause, without the announcements, and without the noise. There's a spiritual discipline in silence. It's the decision to let your actions speak louder than your intentions. It's the wisdom to know that fruit is more convincing than promises. When you don't share every detail, you keep your mind clear and your spirit unbothered. You give yourself the freedom to change direction without explanation. You allow space for God to redirect you if needed, without the pressure of explaining it to those who were never part of the assignment in the first place. A silence about your next step also allows you to develop it fully. It gives you room to test the idea, to work out the kinks, to pray through the confusion. When you share too soon, you invite feedback that may not align with your calling. Not every voice deserves a seat at your planning table. Not every opinion needs to weigh in on your dream. And the more sacred the next step, the more fiercely it must be protected. People often ask questions out of curiosity, not concern. They want to know what you're doing next, not so they can support you, but so they can measure your progress against their own. But a wise woman no longer feels obligated to explain herself. She knows her calling doesn't require consensus. Her journey doesn't require validation. Her purpose doesn't need a press release. And there's also a deeper confidence that grows in the quiet. When you learn to trust yourself, you don't need the world to agree with your decisions. You move because you're led, not because you're liked. You act because you're prepared, not because you're pressured. You shift because you're convicted, not because you're competing. That's a kind of strength that comes only from time, from experience, and from learning the hard way that too much exposure can attract unnecessary warfare. Keeping your next move private doesn't mean you're walking alone. It means you're walking with clarity. You know who's supposed to be with you. And you're no longer desperate to drag people along just to feel supported. You've learned that some journeys are too sacred to be shared, too personal to be posted, and too important to be diluted with noise. You're not being secretive. Eventually, your results will do the talking. The doors will open. The shifts will be seen. The fruit will bloom. And the ones who were watching will realize that while they were waiting for a sign, you were already moving. While they were expecting an update, you were building something in silence that they now can't deny. So be okay with not announcing your every intention. Be comfortable being underestimated. Be fine with being overlooked in the meantime. Because when your next move is rooted in purpose and wrapped in silence, nothing and no one can stop what's already been ordained. Your power isn't in your plan being known. It's in your plan being protected. And the moment it's ready, it will show up stronger, louder, and more undeniable than anything you could have ever said. So today, let this be a reminder to every woman listening. You don't owe the world access to every corner of your life. There is strength in your silence. There is power in your privacy. There is wisdom in knowing what to share and what to protect. Not because you're hiding in fear, but because you're walking in discernment. In a culture that celebrates oversharing, you've chosen something more powerful: control. You've chosen to protect your growth, your healing, your strategy, your heart, your future. You're not less transparent because you're private. You're not less authentic because you don't expose everything. What you are is wise. What you are is mature. What you are is focused. And in this world, that makes you rare. There's a reason some of the most impactful women you've ever seen move quietly until the work is done. They don't speak from emotion. They speak from results. They don't lead with drama. They lead with direction. And they've learned that if you give too much of yourself too soon, you leave nothing sacred for your own soul. So whether you're in the middle of building a dream, healing from pain, planning your next step, or simply growing in peace, keep what needs to be private, private. You don't have to prove anything. You don't need to post every move. You don't need to explain your silence. You are allowed to be powerful and quiet at the same time. Let them wonder. Let them assume. Let them think they know. Because when it's time, what you've been protecting will speak for itself. And when it does, the world won't just see what you've done. They'll see the strength it took to do it without needing their permission. You are a woman of substance. You are a woman of vision. You are a woman who understands that real power is not in being loud. It's in being grounded. And when you live like that, hiding what needs to be hidden, guarding what's still growing, and trusting God with what's still unfolding, nothing can stop you. You're not just strong, you're strategic. You're not just confident, you're covered. And you're not just quiet, you're in control. Keep rising, keep building, keep moving, and keep it to yourself. Because sometimes the most powerful woman in the room is the one no one saw coming.